Rich Kahn, good morning from New York. Uh, Welcome to the Entrepreneur Next Door. Thank you for doing this. I'm going to ask you because I've got tons of notes and questions for you. You're a very interesting guy. So I'm going to ask you, maybe introduce yourself for just about a minute.
My name is Richard Kahn. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I think I've built at this point five or six multi-million dollar web properties over the last 31 years, all bootstrapping. So my expertise is in bootstrapping. Been a developer since age 9. Wrote my first game when I was 9. Got published when I was 12. Just loved programming. And when the internet hit, I know it came out in September 1991. 1993, I got on it. It was been hooked ever since. I did stuff on the predecessor to the internet called ARPANET back in the 80s when I was in high school. Um, just love the ability for computers and technology to be able to connect all over the world instantly. Right now, the last probably 20 years of my life has been working on fighting fraud.
Perfect. So I'm going to be jumping all over the place because you're an interesting guy, and I'm going to try and grab as much as I can during the time we have.
Sure.
Um, so, before we recorded, and as a confession, I came across a connection request you sent me back in 2018, and like an idiot, I missed it. And so here we are 6 years later, I came across it and I said, how did I miss this guy? So I apologize, but I'm glad you said yes anyway. Okay, so the show is called The Entrepreneur Next Door, and I love to interview and tell stories of people who are literally somebody who could be my next door neighbor who's successful, an entrepreneur, has got so much to share. I don't have any celebrities on my podcast. Most of them would say no anyway because I don't have a million followers. I'm getting up to 5,000, which is okay with me.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I love all this stuff about you because I looked at your educational background. Dude, you went to a community college, Rockland, New York. So originally you're from New York, where I'm from. You went to community college.
Yeah.
Uh, no fancy Ivy League, nothing. No fancy MBAs. What golden resumes with academic institutions, and here you are, super successful, which a guy like me is super proud. Interestingly, I'm kind of
There's a
giving you.
story. There's a story behind that.
Yeah, go ahead, and I'll ask you to tell it. I just want to say that it's poetic justice that what you say on LinkedIn is my initial course of study at community was robotics engineering, and after you looked at current salaries, you switched to business management, right? So
Yeah.
now you can tell your story. I mean, I told you we'll be all over the place. I got a ton of questions, but hey, this is for fun. Go for it.
I'm all over the place to begin with, so this is going to be
Good.
great. Well, initially, I didn't have the SAT scores or the grades, but I did get accepted based on my published works through different magazines to MIT for, at the time, they didn't call it robotics engineering, they called it electromechanical engineering. So, and it's funny, the years I would have gone, which would have been 1990 to 1994, Watson was produced during that time. If you saw the movie 21, where they got the students from MIT to take down Vegas, I guarantee I would have been part of
Mhm.
that because I was in all the math and science, which was part of my curriculum. But again, I was 17, 18 years old when I got accepted, but I was living on my own at that time. So I went to the guidance counselor, said, "Hey, look, I've got the acceptance letter from MIT." She's like, "Oh, that's great." I'm like, "Well, how do I pay for it?" And she's like, "Oh, just talk to your parents." I'm like, "But I live on my own. So what do I do?" She's like, "You can try to apply for financial." Like, there was just no course, no way for me to afford the whatever it was a year to go to MIT. So I figured, let me start off in Rockland Community College because I can afford that, and then see if I can get 2 years done there, and then bounce up to MIT and hopefully get accepted again to MIT. But I got in there. I was all excited. I was taking a ton of programming courses, and I was actually teaching the teachers how to do the programming courses better than the way they knew it themselves. And I'm like, I don't know if this is going to be the right direction for me because I think they just go way too slow for the course of study. Like, I would learn a language overnight. They're teaching it over a semester. I'm like, it's way too slow for how fast I can absorb this information. But so I started. I said, all right, this is what I love to do. This is what I want to do. And then I said, but I also want to make good money. So let me take a look. And I found one guy in the robotics field making like 60 grand a year. And I'm like, it's not going to cut it. So I switched to business. After 2 years, realized, and I took a bunch of business courses, and I took courses with people that were actually in business as opposed to just teachers.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to learn from people who have actually done it, as opposed to people who just went to school, learned a subject, and they're just reteaching the subject. Nothing wrong with that, but I really wanted to learn from people who actually in the trenches and who actually did it. So I found a bunch of the courses were people that were in the space for 30, 40 years and then retired, and the wives kicked them out of the house and you got to do something. You can't stay here home all day long. So they became teachers. I enjoyed those professors better than ones that were just teaching a subject that they learned and then they're teaching again, because they would say, okay, the book says this, but this is actually, if you remember the movie Back to School with Rodney Dangerfield.
Yep.
The same thing. It's like, I don't want to learn from from somebody who's a professor. I want to learn from somebody who actually went out and did it, and now knows, okay, the book teaches this, but this is reality. And that's really what I was looking for, that kind of experience. And in Rockland Community College, they had a couple of professors like that in a bunch of the business classes, which I totally enjoyed. But after 2 years, I realized, you know what, I'm going to be better off just starting a business and getting into the work world and starting I'm not going to learn what I want to learn in school. What I didn't realize is the connections you make in school are probably equally as important as the education. I didn't realize that at that age. But so I got the 2 years, got out, and started putting business together.
So what was it about coding? And this is like very, very early on, right? We're talking. I mean, you got into the internet before people knew what the internet is, but you at 9 you were coding. What attracted you to coding? Because it's sort of like a lonely universe, right? It's
Yep.
you and a keyboard. What was that appealed to you so much?
I found it easy and interesting that it's almost like creating art, right? You're building, but it's logical art, because the way I think is all logical, like A plus B equals C, right? Things have to work out logically. And I just totally got, my father used to work for the military, building guidance systems and all kinds of interesting things for the military and for NASA. And, on weekends, we used to go into the office if he had some things that he had to get finished up. And I would just start messing around with, mainframe computers. And I was like 6, 7, 8 years old, just loved it. And in the school that I went to, starting in the 4th grade, they actually brought in computers. They were the Commodore PET computers back then with the built-in green screen and tape drive.
Mhm.
And they would bring them into the classes. And if you finished your work early, you'd be able to jump on one of these computers. So there was the incentive to finish the classwork fast. So I'd get one of the 4 computers and I just start messing around, playing with stuff. And when I was 9 years old, I guess that was 4th or 5th grade, I wrote a game on those computers during that extra class time that we had access to. And I just found it interesting, and I can see where the future was heading, even at that age. And I wanted to be part of it, especially because I found something that I was really good at and I excelled at and I just enjoyed doing. And, I just didn't stop. I was enthralled with what was going on. I built, in the 80s, the Commodore computer was a very popular computer because it was advanced for its time. And me and a friend of mine set up a bulletin board system, which today is known as a website. The only difference is, in order to connect to a bulletin board system, you had to know the phone number to dial your computer into in order to get access to the resources. But, this was the 80s, and we had what was called ARPANET, which was the predecessor to internet. So what happened was people can actually send email, and I was just like, I was hooked on this. You can actually type an email address, and the email addresses were really long because it had to actually give you different addresses to go to. And I could email somebody in California, and the way it would work is somebody would log into my system, or I would log into the system, type out the email, put the right email address, and hit send. And what would happen is at like 3 a.m, when nobody was logging onto our computer, onto our website or bulletin board system at the time, our system would dial into an ARPANET server, upload all the outgoing mail, download all the incoming email. And what happened, because remember, long distance charges were back then. You'd pay for long distance connections. We didn't want to do that. So we would find the furthest place you can dial into without paying, additional fees, upload and download mail. And that one would do the same thing. And eventually it would make it all the way down to California. The person there would get their email. They would do the same thing in reverse, and it would bounce all the way back. So you'd be able to transmit emails to California without paying a bill, And sure, it would take 5 days to get to to get to the West Coast, but that was the early days of what this technology was going to do. And once the internet was introduced, I think it was September 1st of 1991 is the date I keep reading. That was the date the internet was turned over to, public for us to start messing with.
Mhm.
Back then, everything had to be dialed in and dialed out with modems and phone numbers. Once that hit, now everything was connected almost instantly. So it just changed everything. It was just the next version of this interconnected, community. And I didn't get on it right away. I got on it in 93 based on my lifestyle and what was going on at the time. But in 93, I was hooked. There was no web browser. It was all command line. You had to be real geeky, I guess, to be able to communicate and navigate around this new medium. And we just had a lot of fun. So what I started doing was my first business then was I wrote a newsletter. And I'm not a writer. Everybody that knows me, I suck at writing. I can't spell. I'm just like the worst type of writer. But I was reading and consuming so much information on what the internet was doing. I felt like I can write a newsletter on this, and I was just sharing this information just for fun. And I was trolling like AOL news groups back in the day, telling people I'm writing up, have a newsletter on what's going on with the internet. It's a weekly publication. If you're interested, just give me your email address. In like 6 months, I had like 20,000 people subscribe to this newsletter. And somebody turned around and said, "Hey, can I advertise in your newsletter?" And that was the first business. That was just fun.
So for my audience, who's made up of entrepreneurs, small business owners, lots of marketing people are on my podcast, and this is where it might sound a little techy in the beginning. I promise everybody that's listening, this is going to get way more sexier and interesting in just a few minutes. You're like a poster child for what we say small business, and I'm a business coach for the past 12 years, and scripted my career, especially in small business. We have kind of like similar life perspectives, like what you just said about you lived alone and you got accepted to MIT. I came here as a new immigrant. I had enough money for first year tuition, but then I had to work full time during my undergrad studies. And I was a psychology major, wanted to keep going, wasn't going to do a PhD, but then I was accepted to what probably one of the best schools in the country for international business called Thunderbird School of Business in Arizona. But that was a 2 year program and you could not work. And I said, how am I going to support myself? I just go to school. So, like you, I did a quick left turn into marketing and got my MBA in Pace University in New York City, but worked full time through this whole thing. But I worked for IBM in graduate school, and I knew I was never going to work for a big company as a career. I'm just not scripted for it. I'm too straightforward and open, and I don't like games. So I went to the small family universe because I felt, and like what you told me, like one of my friends worked for IBM, and I said, Mandy, you've been here for 10 years. How much do you make? And he said, $50,000. And he was a brilliant Caltech PhD guy. And I said, I can't wait this long. I mean, I got a kid. I'm 29. I'm not climbing some ladder to one day get a corner office and make 50,000 or whatever. Um, so my universe is in small business, particularly family-owned businesses, and it's an incredibly challenging, interesting dynamic. You're the poster child of what we would call a family business, right? Your partner is your wife, and I wrote a list of everybody that works. Your brother-in-law works for you. Your mother-in-law used to work for you. You're a brave man, by the way. You fired two of your kids. It doesn't get more family small business than what you're doing. And I want to talk about Beth, your wife, and that dynamics later. But let's go back to what you do. Uh, from everything I've learned about you, and I tend to spend a lot of time studying, you've never worked for anyone else your entire career, right? You started your thing,
No,
not
I
not
did.
officially, not officially, maybe. I
Yeah,
don't
no,
know.
no, I did. I did very, very beginning, like when you're first learning, because you got to pay the bills, right?
Yeah, yeah.
I got married when we were 21, had our first child at 22. By 28, I had four kids, you know. So it was, when you're trying to figure out your way in the world and start businesses like, especially bootstrapping where you don't have some big pile of cash that you can pay yourself a salary from as you're trying to build stuff out. So in the very beginning, the two companies that I really worked for, once I got into my 20s, let's say, I worked for Verizon for a little bit on their cellular division because their whole goal in life at that time was, I want you to call a person, not a place, which
Mm.
obviously is accomplished. I wasn't called Verizon back then. They've changed their name multiple times since I've been there. But I was in the sales department because I could sell. I was a top salesperson inside of 3 months. Stayed there for a couple of years, enjoyed it, and then I went to work for Bloomberg in Manhattan, which I really enjoyed. It's working for a company. They really treated you as a member of the team. I was their guru in Unix, so they had about 10% of their clients ran on a Unix platform, and I was their only support, level 3 support rep that they had. So for me, it was great because I'd go out to these big networks and figure out what's going on and write code and be able to figure out what's going on and then bring it back to developers and give them a game plan of how to solve the problem. And I enjoyed it until I decided to leave and start and go full time in my own businesses, which was probably January of 2000, if I remember correctly. And since then, I haven't gone back. I've been 100%,
Okay.
on my own stuff.
So especially with Bloomberg, you had an opportunity to really see a guy who runs a company with the type of culture, because I know a little bit about him, but the type of culture that allows people to develop personally and professionally and feel appreciated, right? Because that's really the key to success, at least from my 40 years experience in business, is the owners that instill that type of a work environment don't have to worry about anybody coming to work and wanting to work. People just do this
Mhm.
because they feel ownership in their business. Even they might be sitting in a cubicle, it doesn't matter. So so your entrepreneurial career is pretty much dedicated, and you correct me if I'm wrong, to identifying fighting fraud online. Is that a
That's
good
what,
statement?
yeah, that's for the last 20 years. That's what my currently, if I have 30 years, 31 years on the internet, I fought fraud along the way, but the majority of my time has been spent in the last 20 years really drilling down on fraud and figuring out what's going on.
Right. So this is from, I think, your numbers. The online marketplace, in terms of transactional dollars, is about $500 billion annually, of which about 100 billion can be identified as fraudulent transactions behavior. Right.
That was
So
2022's numbers. The 2023 numbers are a little bit higher. $600 billion as an industry, and now we're predicting about 125 billion lost to fraud.
yeah. So 20% of what's out there is fraud. Can you define, because this is you're the expert. Can you define, and again, we're talking about online world, we're not talking about other stuff. Can you define fraud in your world?
Yeah,
Like explain it to us to an 8-year-old kind of
yeah.
stuff.
So fraud, in my opinion, and we focus on identifying if the visitor that's interacting with your website is real or fake. And when we talk about fake, we call it fraud. It's an interaction that was produced by a bot, by malware, or human fraud farms. So it's the basis of what it is. So in other words, let's say you go to, I'm not going to pick a company's name, but you go online and you spend, $1 million a month in digital marketing, and you're losing $200,000 a month to fraud. The goal is to identify which $200,000 that is, identify where it's coming from, and reduce or eliminate all of that so that your budget can all go to real people and real people convert. So the whole goal is to reduce that and move that budget over to real people so your performance improves without spending more money. And most companies, once we're able to accomplish that for them, which happens in the first couple months, depending on how where they're buying their traffic, will tell you that we transform their business because 20% of a marketing budget, if you can take, if that 20% is non-productive and you can remove most, if not all of that to productive, that's a
Mm.
huge boost in the campaign performance that any media buyer or any marketing head of marketing is going to want to see. You know, it makes a huge difference in their bottom line.
Right. So I'll use names because as a business coach and heavily involved in marketing, it's part of my universe and my clients' universe. So to people that, again, I want my audience to understand what we're talking about. So let's say I'll use a simple example. I'm a home improvement company.
Mm-hmm.
We do roofing, siding, windows, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And then we go out and we buy from Google. We basically spend money on Google ads, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's the sponsored ad that you see
Sure.
on our web searches. And then people that do an active search on Google see our ad and they click on our ad. And every time they click, it's a cha-ching thing on our account because Google will charge us for every click. We deliver the traffic to you. Here's the person that found you interesting or a good match for what they're looking for the search intent. They clicked. The click could be anything from $1 to, in very competitive industries, could be 25, 50, or even more dollars for each click, right?
Mhm.
Um, what you're talking about is identifying, is the person clicking on the ad, is this a real person interested, or is this a bot, which is an automated artificial intelligence things that crawl the internet, right? On
Correct.
purpose. So for a small business owner who's make their living on mostly referrals, but then they spend a good chunk of money on Google ads, Bing ads, Yahoo ads, whoever it is, they buy traffic, search traffic. Um, it's expensive.
Yeah.
It's expensive. One, because they get charged. Two, like the home improvement guy, he gets a lead and then he's going to start chasing that lead, whether it's an email, whether it's a phone call, and having resources try to follow up on that lead, and doesn't go anywhere because it's not real, right? So it's
It gets actually worse
go ahead.
because right now, let's say you're this home improvement person, you drive a click from Google over to your site and they fill out the form. But
Hmm.
what's happening is these fraudsters, they know that they got to fill out that form so it looks like it's performing so that you keep
Right.
paying for it, right? So now here's what happens. Let's say you use your information. So they put Zev's information in the system. They put your phone number, your email address, and it all matches. And then you start calling and they start reaching out to you. First off, you're not expecting their call, right? So it's going to take a lot longer to try to get you on the phone. So they're going to spend more money on call center resources or their own
Hmm.
personal time, depending on the business. But now, let's say they do get you on the phone. They're broke TCPA compliance. And it's the fastest growing lawsuit in this country is people are suing people for not, for calling them without their permission. Because
Right.
according to the TCPA, and that can get really expensive. You're looking at what a lot of people do. If you're making a lot of calls, let's say you're a small roofer and you're doing a couple hundred calls a month, each one of those calls is suable for $500 to $1,500 per call. So if I called you 10 times and finally got you on a call, you can technically sue me 500 times each attempt that I made to call you, each time I sent a text message to you, and that adds up fast. So a lawyer gets involved, you get a lawyer, go to tcplawyers.com, right? Whatever it is up on you see on TV, you pick up and say, hey, Rich's company called me 10 times and I didn't give him permission. Great. They knock on my door, they're going to send a $10,000 lawsuit. It's probably cheaper just to pay the bill than it is to hire a lawyer to protect me because
Mm.
by law, I did break the law. I called you and I have permission to call you. So now they get some in a lot of hot water.
What
Now,
is TC? What does TCP stand for?
it's the telephone consumer
Protection. Okay.
protection.
Okay.
I forget the whole thing of it.
So that's the equivalent of the anti-spam regulation
Yeah.
in email marketing, basically saying no robocalls. If I didn't give permission to call me, don't call me. But again, so I kind of wrote a note in terms of, to me, there are two types of fraud, and I like to simplify things, and I apologize to you if I'm oversimplifying it. There's a fraud for mostly your B2B clients, the people you serve, right? Who need to identify fraud, incoming lead generation that's fraudulent,
Hmm.
or maybe the ISP themselves, they want to reduce the fraud because it's causing them a lot of lost revenue and trust in their platforms, whether it be Google and Yahoo, Bing, whoever. But then there's also the frauds from the consumer standpoint, right? Like what you just mentioned. I don't want to get these phone calls, these robocalls, and all this other stuff that's interrupting my day because I didn't give them permission,
Yeah.
and I don't know where they found me, and I don't really care. It's almost, to me as a consumer, is a lost cause because I don't, and I think this is now a trend. I don't answer calls,
Hmm.
unidentified calls, because, and I'll tell you why, and you tell me if I'm right, because I read somewhere that if you're on a robocall list of a fraudster and you actually pick up the phone, you're confirming that it's a valid number,
Hmm.
and now you're never off that list. So I just ignore them. And I'm assuming that if somebody is trying to reach me that's not in my contact list, but it's actually legit, they'll leave me a voicemail that they're trying to find me, right? Am I Is there a better way? Because I haven't found it.
You're 100% right, because we all get unwanted phone calls nonstop. They'll spoof, your local area code. So it looks like I'm in Delaware, right? I have very few people that call me from Delaware. It might be my doctors, some people that I met that not on my contact list. But no, so they'll spoof a 302 area code. So I'm thinking, oh, it's local. Maybe I should answer it. I don't even answer those anymore. Same thing. You leave a voicemail, I'll get back to you, or send me a text. But I'm not
Yeah,
answering those calls, because 9 times out of 10, in fact, the phone will tell me, "Oh, this is a spam. This is a spam call."
so yeah,
Yeah, or they'll give you some indication, and so I definitely don't answer those calls. So again, it's a situation where, you know, like I said, if you went online and said, "Hey, I need a new roof," and you filled out that roofer's lead form and you hit submit, and within minutes the phone's ringing, you're like, "Oh, that's probably them,"
yeah.
right? And
And
then
I want and mention the platform because they did the right thing, but this particular client spent a small fortune on buying ads and positioning in a certain space, and they got spam in a really big way, where every form that was coming in was spam. Every single day somebody broke into their system,
yeah,
and not only did it cost a lot of money, but the process of trying to get to them and getting them to recognize there's a black hole in your system, and we're getting hundreds of forms, and it's clear some of them look legit, others didn't, and the way you could tell they were not legit because there were multiple questions on the form. The name, phone number, and email were filled in, but everything else was not.
right.
So it was kind of like suspicious, right? They finally admitted and said, "Look, yeah, we have a problem, and we will do the right thing, and we're trying to do the best." And maybe they hired you to fix it. That doesn't matter. I'm not going to mention their name, but that's so. There's a economic cost to fighting fraud, and there's an economic cost in loss opportunity. It's opportunity cost. Like if you have a sales rep in the office trying to chase someone who's a fraudulent lead, while at the same time they could spend time engaging with a real good lead and convert them, that's impactful, right? So,
Yeah, the other part of that too is I've talked to little bigger companies where they have call centers and they have a dozen or 2 dozen reps that are making phone calls, returning all these leads, right? And what we found also is that 20% or it's 25% of the leads that they're calling were bogus leads, right? So what happens is you finally get you on the phone and you're like, "Where the hell did you get my information from? I didn't fill out your form."
mhm,
So I'm a rep who thinks I'm calling somebody who asked about my service.
exactly.
So now I'm like, "Oh, man," like you're calling people and you're getting demoralized because you're calling people who don't want to talk to you. Meanwhile, your job is to talk to people who want to talk to you. So now what happens? Your morale drops, and then you get somebody on the phone who actually did fill out the form, and because your morale has been dropped from all these other calls, your
Yeah,
sales ability is not as good as it was because you're a little bit down in the dumps.
yeah,
So
and you're absolutely right. Because and again, I'll stay with the home improvement company because they were great and very very challenging business. All the competitors advertise on the same platform, and so when you call someone in Queens who were interested in a roof, they would literally scream at you on the phone. You say, damn it, this is the 10th phone calls I'm getting. I didn't ask. I don't need a roof. I don't want a roof. Don't ever call me again. And for me, the scariest part is that if you've built a good brand and a reputation, particularly home improvement companies are local and people like you, and 50% of businesses referrals. And now people are starting to talk about you as a spammer, as a pain in the ass company that just calls them and annoys them.
yeah, brand reputation.
There's a huge cost in brand erosion that you can't put money on, dollars on. So you officially, again, you tell me if I'm wrong because I spent a lot of time learning. So you officially launched your first business in 2017, I think, right?
For this product, yeah.
For this product, yeah. And you did something. I'm a marketing guy, and you do things that to me, like I said, wow, there is somebody out there. You did something courageous from my perspective. And if you look on your website, you said, we promise you clean traffic, right?
Hmm.
You got on a ledge and you said, look, you're going to get clean traffic. It's almost like companies that offer money back guarantee, where if you truly have a great product and you stand behind it, Yes, you're not going to satisfy every single person. If somebody's not happy, there's your money, not a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you in the tech world, when you come out and say, I'm going to guarantee you're going to get clean traffic, so I'm going to catch and eliminate the fraudsters, that's pretty bold statement, right? And the other thing I liked about your story was that when you and your wife Beth decided to go out, you said, okay, before we release this product, we need to convince ourselves that we have something that nobody else has, right? It's like the differentiate or die, which is the key to marketing that most people don't do the hard work and they just jump out and here I am, right? So you took a year to convince and confirm that what you're about to launch can live up to the promise you just made, right?
Yeah.
So talk about that because this is brilliant entrepreneurship, marketing, all of the above. Because it's brilliant, but it's also smart because you're not going to waste time learning that you're not the best one, right? You
Yeah.
you confirmed it. So talk about that because that was it.
Yeah. So interesting what your research is turning up, but yeah, it's all there. So what actually happened was we had another company, was an ad network, and we were going to try to sell the company. Like we were at a stage where it was growing, it was worth, we had some value to it. And we figured, let's exit from this and move on to other things. And what ended up happening was I ran a whole process. We hired an M&A banker to run the whole process. Spoke to Google, Yahoo, Bing, and about a half a dozen other big companies. And they all said the same thing. We don't care about your ad network. It's been done. Nobody cares. And they said, but the fraud detection component of what you built is really interesting. Do you have clients behind it? And is it a standalone product? And we had to say no. And they all said the same thing. Once you do, call us back. So it got us to thinking, maybe it's at a time where we should, spin this off into its own company. But before we went ahead and built another platform, I said we need to figure out if we're bringing something new to the market. Like, are we just another vendor doing something different, or do we actually have a better product? So we spent six figures of our money in 2015 and tested up. We had access to 4 or 5 of the top companies at that time that were doing fraud detection, and we had access to them. So what we did was we bought traffic on Google and Yahoo, drove traffic to the same landing page, had them fill out a form for whatever, and I can't remember the campaign that we ran, but we had them fill out a form was the ultimate goal because we can human verify that, yes, I called up Zev and he did fill out this form. He did want more information on whatever we were offering. So I knew it was a legitimate lead or I knew it was a bogus lead. So we had a way to human verify that the results were right. And then I had all 4 scoring systems, including our own, scan that traffic and score it however they wanted to score it. And then we went back and looked at the data after human validating it to confirm what was real and what was fake, and then compared how each of these vendors marked it. And the first test we ran took 3 months to run. Once we got all the data in, we realized we crushed the competitors when it came to 2 things: accuracy, making sure we're marking real fraudulent, that's really fraud, and thoroughness. We were finding more fraud than the other guys. And I said, great, let's do it again. And we ran another test. And then I said, you know what? Run it one more time. I just want to make sure we really are this much better than the competition, because if we are, I can definitely sell this. If we're not, we're just another vendor in the market just trying to, grab a few clients. After 3 tests in the course of a year and 6 figures in budgets, we spent on just testing, found out that we did offer a better solution that was more accurate and more thorough than the other solutions in the marketplace. And at that point, it said, you know what? Let's go ahead, get a second mortgage on the house, hire a bunch of people, and let's build this. So that was 2015. We did the tests. 2016, we had to add a bunch of stuff to it. We actually got some beta testers to test out all the other functionality that we built out, got their feedback. And in 2017, it was actually April 1st of 2017, we launched Nora as a standalone product.
So one of the things that intrigued me, and because we're all business people, we talk about identifying fraud as this is not a true lead. You have apparently about 100 companies in your space in fraud detection, right? Roughly, give or take 100, whatever the number is. But 15% of them deliver false positive, meaning, so that's the other piece that absolutely intriguing to me. So people that they mark as fraud but are actually good leads.
Yeah. So what we found is that the average fraud solution has a 15% false positive rate. Some of them as high as 50% false positive. Because again, if I'm your fraud vendor, I want to prove to you that I'm finding all this fraud. Unless you're human verifying the data, you just assume that they're right. Because we live in a world right now where we buy software and we expect it to work, right? That's what's on.
Yep.
For example, most business people, if not all, use Excel to some extent to make business decisions. They put all this information into it, calculates, generates some output, and then you make decisions based on the output. When was the last time we went and checked to make sure Excel was actually doing its job and adding up those columns right? No one, because we just assume it works. Well, when people buy software in my space, they just assume it does the job, and it's not a black and white scenario. There's a lot of math and science that goes into this, and some people get it right, some people don't. So what we've done is, and then this is kind of a little on the technical side, but this will give you an understanding. Most of my competitors will come back with this numerical score from 0 to 100. And the ones the instructions that I've read on many of them say that this is a confidence level score or a probability score to be fraud. Right. So what'll happen is once it hits 70% or 65%, whatever they recommend, they'll tell you, okay, this is high enough to go ahead and block it. We consider it fraud. But the mathematician in me wants to know, okay, what about the other 30%? Isn't that likely to be real? And that's where false positives come from. So if you were to do that, we don't give a numerical score. We give a good or bad response. If we say it's bad, we are 100% confident it's not real. And based on client feedback, we're the only company with a 99.999% accuracy rating when identifying fraud. So that basically means that 1 in 100,000 scans, we could potentially be wrong. And it's not even that. It's not even there. It's greater than that. So the accuracy level is higher than that. And it's important because our clients want to know, should I charge this credit card? Should I let this person fill out a form? Should I let this person log into my system and create an account? Like, they need to know right then and there, and they have to be accurate. Because we had a client that was selling 30,000 airline tickets a day through their platform, e-commerce platform. And they were having problems with fraud. So they came to us and they said, before we even test you, we need to know what your accuracy rating is, because we know that if you're even just a fraction of a percent wrong, mismarking real people as fraud, you're going to cost me more in lost transactions than what I spend, in 10 minutes than I spend with you all month. So how do we fix that? And we were able to prove that, they were able to count on our accuracy, which they can't do with most of the other solutions. So when we talk to a client, we're trying to sell them on, you need to really do your due diligence. You really need to look at the data. We're asking, if not begging them, to look at the behind the scenes data when they're judging us versus somebody else, so they can understand where the difference is, because we're not all the same.
So Seth Godin, who's been my mentor for the past 30 plus years, wrote a book a long time ago. I think the original title was All Marketers Are Liars, and then he kind of changed it and says All Marketers Tell Stories. But I want to stick to the lying part. I spent 20 years in the medical device industry and worked with a lot of cool companies that came up with devices to fix us. Mm-hmm. And one thing the FDA has, when you go and get apply for an FDA approval, there's something called, you have to show enough objective evidence, not your claims, but you have to show objective evidence that your device or whatever it is you're going to do is actually curing, treating, fixing people. So when you say to someone, like you said before, I'm 99.95 positively commit to my data is accurate, they can either take your word for it, but how do you objectively prove that?
Well,
do you talk to the IT guy and explain how you do it so they understand it?
We do that, but we always tell them, look, I'm trying to sell my product. Don't take my word for it. We give you a free trial, run the data, but then here's a document on how to vet out the data, whether it's us or somebody else. It's a logical document that walks you step by step through evaluating and looking at the data points that you should be looking at. And then once you make that data, then you can make an honest decision. So I always tell people, don't trust what I'm saying. Don't trust what my competitors are saying. Trust your data. Trust yourself. And here's a great example of how to be able to look at the data and look at it any which way you want.
So this is maybe, again, I know there's no stupid question, but it's kind of low level question. it's like a how does Rich do it, right? So I'm Zev Asch. I'm on the internet. I look at stuff. I fill forms. I go on a chat bot on a website, and before they answer, they want to grab my information. Um, how do you don't have to tell me your secrets, obviously you won't, but how do you identify that Zev Ash that filled this form is a real person? Do you go out and verify that I exist on different data points on the internet that confirm to you, okay, this is a real guy?
No, that's
Just like,
spoofable. That's spoofable. So here's the thing.
oh, okay, yeah,
We do all of our work before you fill in information, right?
okay,
Because the way our technology works is we have 1 second when we see you as a visitor to decide if you're real or fake. So I'm not looking at user behavior. I'm not looking at any of that. What I do is I grab over 800 data points on your environment that I'm able to collect. I send it, that data gets collected, it gets sent back to our system. Our system then analyzes that data. It knows what the data is supposed to look like, how it interacts with each other, and then kicks back a positive response. I'll give you an example. Let's say you're sitting well, let's say the visitor comes to my site and I ping it and I realize, okay, they're sitting in a Starbucks. So it's a shared IP address with a lot of different people, right? They're coming from an iPhone 15, looks legitimate. Most of my competitors would say, thumbs up, good traffic, send it through. But we come along, we scan and find out that iPhone that you claim you're coming from doesn't have a touchscreen. We know that's a problem, right? Not definitively fraud, but where there's smoke, there's fire. So there's some problem going on there. And that's kind of what we're looking for. We're looking at your environment and decide, and we have rules that we've been building for the last 20 years on how to determine that data. And of course, every time a new browser comes out, a new version comes out, there's different things the different data points we can collect. We just keep adding to it and retesting and making sure that we're getting data. But that's pretty much the long and short of how we do what we do. And most of my competitors do things very differently. They're looking at, oh, wow, how many times did this IP address click on this link? And oh my God, what was the time it took from them to get to the landing page to click on a link? And what link did, they're using all this user behavior, which has some validity to it, but generates a lot of false positives.
so here's another stupid question from a consumer standpoint. A lot of us believe that if we use sites like DuckDuckGo, or even if at a bare minimum you go into the privacy setting of Chrome or anybody else, that your identity is protected. And I'm guessing that's a myth, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, let's face it, you're using Chrome, right? So now Google sees everything you do.
Mm-hmm.
You don't think they give out software for free, do you? Look at
Yeah.
look at Microsoft Clarity Insights. If you guys are familiar with that, this is free software you can get from Microsoft. Install on your website. It records video, like sessions of what people are looking at, heat maps, so you can see where they're
Yeah.
clicking on, so you can build a better user experience. You think they do that for free? No, they're collecting your data. So look at your iPhone. It's collecting data. Look at Facebook. Facebook has over 7,500 data points on you. So they know how to market to you. They know how to manipulate you. Like I said, they don't give out the software for free, and they're a billion-dollar company. There's a reason for it. When their advertisers come along and say, I want to speak to people that do X, based on all the data points they have, they can build an audience specifically for that.
Yeah.
And target those ads to them and make a boatload of money. That's how they make their billions. So none of your data is truly protected. When you go into like an incognito browser, what you're doing is you're hiding your cookies, you're hiding any session data. So you're hiding some stuff, but not everything. It's still there.
Including VPN. If I'm on a VPN, is that better?
It is if you want to slow your entire internet processing down, because if you ever try going through a VPN, your sessions are going to be slower. So
Yeah.
my question is, if you're using a VPN to hide yourself and be private, what are you trying to hide?
Yeah. All right. So next question, I'm gonna surprise you, and then I'm gonna let you answer it, right?
Okay.
And you'll know why I'm asking the question. So, how is fraud detection similar or dissimilar to martial arts?
Hmm.
And you can share with everybody why I asked you a question,
Yeah.
because yeah.
All right. So the reason why you're asking the question is because I have 17 years of study in martial arts. I was actually invited to the 2000 Olympics to compete. Couldn't, because we just had our second child, just bought a house, just got my first, big boy job at the time. And, things were just, it's one of my regrets. What if it would have been a fun experience? But Always loved martial arts. I actually stopped going because I had some surgery back in 2009 and just never got back into it. Something that I plan on getting back into. But anyway, how are they similar or dissimilar? You know, when you're doing fraud detection, when you're doing martial arts, people give you tools, right, and technique on what to do and how to do it. But the art between both is how you take advantage of those tools to accomplish the goal. What makes a good martial artist versus a great martial artist is not what they studied; it's how they take it, how they use the stuff that they learned. Just like anybody else, like you go to school, you go into school, they teach you all the basics, but it's how you yourself, how your
Hmm.
brain takes that and is utilizing that information to accomplish something that nobody else accomplished before. And that's kind of the same with fraud detection. We've come up with a different way of looking at data. And of course, you know, if you're really technical, you can see what kind of data we're collecting. There's no secret because it's a piece of JavaScript code sits on your page. You can run a little sniffer, look at all the data being collected, and see it. The secret sauce isn't there. The secret sauce is how we use that data once we get it and how we analyze that data. And that's really where our secret sauce lies. And same thing with martial arts. You know, you've given all the basic kicks, punches, blocks, but how you put them together makes the difference between an okay martial artist and a superior athlete. How
Yeah,
fast you implement them.
it's sort of like the work smart, not hard, right?
Yeah.
You have the tools, but you have to identify where's the opening.
Yeah.
All right, so another fun question. I'm gonna go on a limb, and I'm probably gonna be wrong. Did you meet your wife, in high school, and you got married at 21, or is that somewhere else?
That's good. We met in high school. We were 15 when we met, started dating, never stopped.
You're the second. I mean, I met somebody the other day. They said I'm a certified pickleball trainer. I don't know if pickleball made it to Delaware, but here it's on fire. And I started teaching my husband and wife, and I said, "Where'd you guys meet?" So we're high school sweethearts. We went to the same college. We studied the same major. Interesting. So, uh, look, it's if you went to someone, a marriage counselor, and you said, I'm thinking of starting a business, and I think I want my wife to be my partner. I'm guessing the marriage counselor probably tell you don't do it.
I almost guarantee they would say don't do it.
But yet,
Yeah,
20 years later, go ahead.
we did it. So, like I said, my wife was originally trained as a nurse. She was a registered nurse for a couple of years. And when the kids started coming, I was working full time. She was spending more time working nights. And so, like in other words, I would work during the day. She would work at night. So we'd be passing the kids through the night. You know, that's what you did back then, right? Yeah, most of us grandparents help the kids with the kids a lot more than we had growing up. But you know, we started a business and we didn't question it. We didn't think about it. We just did it, you know, because we did a lot of stuff together. And we said, why not start a business together? And we started putting a business together. And, you know, I know people who have done that and it's killed their marriage, it's killed their business. We lucked out. We grew together than most people grow apart because you're putting yourself in a stressful position. A counselor would probably tell you don't do it because you should have your own work life separate from home
Hmm.
life and things should be balanced like that. I can't see doing it without her.
But do you have those rules where at the end of the day, when you were sitting down around the dinner table with the kids, or the kids go to sleep, you actually had that separation? Say, you know what? It's us time. We're not talking business now.
No,
There's, I wouldn't think
because
so.
let's face
It's
it.
hard, right?
Let's face it. Like, okay, you have your work life. Your wife has her work life. You know, you sit down. How was your day? So we still do that because we work different parts of the business. She handles finance, human resources, and operations, and I handle tech, you know, and sales, and help out on the marketing side with. And the two of us work marketing together. I did a bunch of stuff, even though we were working in the same company. I ran a bunch of stuff. She had no idea what was going on. She ran a bunch of stuff. I had no idea what was going on. So at the end of the day, how was your day? We're asking, how was the other side of the business today? Like, what'd you do today? What'd you accomplish? Any decisions that need to be made, and vice versa. No, it's, you know, it's nice because owning a business, we've been at everything for our kids growing up. Every practice, every game, every, you know, parent teacher, you know, conference, every, you know, school trip. You know, I was the father that was on all the school trips. We didn't miss anything with our kids at all. So that was important to us. But that had us working late hours. When you're building a business, so it's not a 9 to 5 job. It's you work nonstop because you're trying to build something. You're not trying to maintain something. You're trying to grow something. And right now, you don't have enough money to pay people to join you and help you out. So every hat you wear, and you
Yeah.
get it done. And at the end of the night, what'd you get today? Anything interesting? Did you close a new client today? Like, where are we? Like, because we don't typically, and that's interesting. Throughout the day, we have a couple meetings a week where we meet together and go over things like our leadership meetings and stuff like that. But other than that, I'm in my office, she's in her office, and we don't talk because we're handling separate parts of the business.
Yeah. So what I've seen in 12 years of coaching and 30 in the corporate world, is that the family businesses that work really well are the ones where the family members complement each other,
Yeah.
right? Because the egos are always pretty high when you're a business owner, but when the partners, with a husband, wife, or son-in-law, son, etc., when they complement and support each other, it works. When they start to overlap and butt heads, that's where everything flares up. They still stay in business, but it's not fun. Yeah, like for you guys, if it wasn't fun to be in business, it would affect your marriage, and then you would probably have to do something about it. But it sounds like it's fun, it's complementary, it allows you a quality of life that you can raise your kids and do a lot of fun stuff with them,
Yeah.
and so you can't beat that. So I can't finish a podcast without bringing up AI, especially in the fraud universe,
Mhm.
because it's pretty scary. Like from stuff we hear about, like mimicking voice output that sounds like you, to everything else. How is AI? Is AI going to disrupt frauds in a way, or are you prepared for it,
We're
or you
prepared
don't know
for it.
what, or you don't know what's coming?
No, we're prepared for it because AI hasn't been around for a year or so. It's been around for decades, right? And it's been getting smarter and smarter. And then, of course, with ChatGPT in 2022, that's when it kind of really hit like I was like, oh my God, look what it can do. It was an example that anybody can log on and say, write me a 20-page article on this. Boom,
Yeah,
there it is. It pulls information from all over the place, puts it together, and in 2 minutes you've got a freshly built article that, oh my God, this is a really good article I can post. It's changed the world a lot. And especially, here's a picture, here's my headshot, put me in a professional atmosphere so I can have some professional photos for different things, and it does it for you, right? But you've got, ChatGPT, and you also now have Fraud GPT. So there's a technology that you can use to say, write me a bot that does this. And it will physically write the coding. And all you have to do is be technical enough to take that coding and launch it, execute it, which doesn't take a lot of skill. Anybody can be taught how to do that. So what it's going to do for the average digital marketer is make your job a lot harder because fraud's going to perpetrate and get even bigger. And if you're not using a company like us to protect yourself, meanwhile everybody else is, you're going to be the one getting hit with the midline share of the fraud. It's going to end up being, so instead of 20% or 25% of your traffic being fraudulent, you'll get 50, 60, 70, 80% because everybody else is doing something about it. So yeah, it's going to definitely change you. I mean, it's great for companies like us because we're going to be here to help people if we're protecting them against that kind of attack. But if they're trying to do it themselves, it's tough because they're only looking at their small data set and what they're doing. And then they have to have the technical skill of looking at data and trying to understand if it's real or fake. Meanwhile, companies like us have access to hundreds of clients' data. So you get to see a lot more data, billions of visitors a day. And we're able to track all that and see market trends across different accounts. And it gets to a point where it's actually cheaper to hire a company like us than it is to try to go about yourself.
yeah, because the opportunity cost, the downside to missing 15% of false positive, which could be, depending on your business, could be decent revenue.
Yeah.
You just gave up, right?
Yeah.
It's a no brainer, and for many of us, again, from a consumer standpoint, so I have malware detection running, and I have antivirus, and I have all that other stuff, and maybe it'll protect you up to a certain point, but when you go into a certain website and you get more exposed, and this stuff's not gonna, it's more incoming than what you actually do with your behavior. Uh, for my audience of a lot of them are SaaS founders, by the way. They're all online people and marketers whose job is performance marketing, right? Generate leads, good quality leads, grow the company. Um, yeah, there's like I think a false impression if you install stuff on your servers that you're protected, but you're not,
Yeah.
or the data that comes from the big guys has been filtered. Not necessarily, right? It's almost like it's a moving target, isn't it, Rich?
It always is. We're making
Keep it with what you do, right?
it's once or twice a week easily
Yeah.
just to keep up with the new fraud trends.
All right. So quick rapid fire questions for you. This is just one or two word answers. If I gave you a billboard in Times Square and you get to put anything you want on it, what would you put on there?
Beware of fraud.
All right. Who is the person that most influenced you in your personal life?
If I talk about a somebody else, like if I'm looking at the like not I'm just looking at the person from a business aspect that probably influenced me most growing up is a guy named Nolan Bushnell. Most people don't know who he is, but he was the first employer of Steve Jobs. He was the founder of Atari. He created Chuck E. Cheese. He created the first video display chip, which made gaming possible. Still building technologies. He was doing so much that in 1980s, 7 companies got together, each put up $1 million for have him stop producing stuff for 7 years. This was a Time magazine article, I think, in 1984. And when he came out of that 7 year of a hiatus, he introduced a family of robots. Again, going back to robotics, which got me into it. I think I was 12 years old when I read that article in Time, and he was just he was always ahead of the curve. Like he built a family of robots with the then technology, which really wasn't much, but it spewed a lot of different like robotics movies coming out in the movie theaters from that. But he was just an amazing entrepreneur, done tons of stuff, but most people don't know him.
But what was it about him that resonates with you so much? His actual ability to create stuff, or was it
He's
something
just the stuff he was thinking so far ahead of like he was ahead of his time, and all the technologies that he built were always like ahead of his time, like building stuff and transforming um, society. Like where would we be back then without the video display chip? We wouldn't have had all those arcades growing up as kids, right? It needed that video display chip in order to produce a game. That changed a whole generation. I mean, a bunch of us grew up going to the arcade on the weekends. I did. Now, of course, the game consoles are at home, so they don't have to go to the arcade for that. But just being able to think ahead and do things just because they were cool, not because it made money. And obviously some things he did make money, like Atari was a huge successful company. Chuck E. Cheese is still a big chain out there for all the kids. But some of the things like the family of robots that he produced, he didn't make any money on that. He lost money on that, but it was just something that was so cool, something so different, something so ahead of its time. And I kind of appreciated that.
So, all right, last question, because I didn't think about asking you that, but this came to my mind. If you can, one piece of tidbit info on fraud that people are not aware of that if you shared would actually shock them.
I don't know if I have a good one to talk about it, but one of the statements I started making recently is, it's no longer a question of if you have fraud.
But when?
It's a question of how much you have.
Yeah, interesting. My neighbor a couple doors down, elderly woman. Last weekend, there were cop cars all over her place, and said, "I hope she's okay." Well, she got a phone call that her daughter was driving drunk and she hit a kid and killed him, and she doesn't have the money to get bailed. So it's $35,000, and she'll send somebody to the house to pick it up. And you would think that in 2024, and this woman is actually very, very smart. It doesn't matter if you're smart or not. When I walked over and I said, "Annette, really?" And she said, "I know, I know, I know." She ran to the bank. She took the money out. Uh, they sent the car to pick up the money, and I guess she gave them only half the money, and then left. And then there were cameras that captured the car, but they actually hired an Uber driver, so they don't do it themselves, right? It's almost like a bot, right? They send an Uber driver to pick up the money.
Yeah.
And so with AI, it could have been her daughter's voice saying, "Mom, I'm in jail. I killed it. My friend such is coming to get the stuff." So it's a pretty scary world. You're doing great work that I think, for the most part, is probably behind the scenes and doing a lot of good for particularly businesses and us who want to protect our identity. So I'm going to say something you probably never hear before, but thank you for your service, Rich. All right, so if somebody wants to find Rich Kahn, what's the easiest way to get to you?
Get me personally is on LinkedIn. I'm easy to find. I've got 25,000 followers. I mean, I'm easy to find there. Otherwise, just go to anora.io. We're there. We're easy to find. His phone number's up
Right,
there. All that contact information's up there.
right. And Anora is ANURA.io, right?
Correct. Yep.
Yep, yep. Okay, Rich, with 25,000 followers and a busy life and all the family working in the business, God knows what other stuff's going on other than just the dynamics. But thank you so much for taking the time to do this. I had a lot of fun. I promised you this will be a great interview. I hope I delivered on it,
I enjoyed it.
and then we will stay in touch.
Appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thanks so much.
Bye now.
Bye.